Well, with more on his study into attitudes around housing in this country, we are now joined by David Coletto, the founder and the CEO of Abacus Data. David, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Very happy to have you. Listen, let's begin with the big number that you highlight in this survey, because as you say, Canadians have not given up on the dream of home ownership. And there might be talk around that, but you say that they still want homes, but their belief that they can make that dream a reality is being shaken.
It is. And so, what this research and other research we've done confirms is that majority of Canadians who don't currently own their home want to. Many say that's important. Many believe that if they had the opportunity to do so, they would. But that first number that you showed on the screen there, many have basically given up. And, even among young Canadians, those under 30, not a lot, not all of them, thankfully yet, but a sizable portion are already of the belief that it's never going to happen and they're losing faith. So this is still very much something that most Canadians aspire to. It's, I think, part of the vision and the dream of what it means to live in Canada and the ability to have a home, to own that home, and to make it an appropriate one to live out the life that people are hoping for.
Okay, so belief being shaken, but a very strong desire from non-homeowners to actually own a home. But when you dig even further, you find that concern around being able to afford a home is not only widespread, but also more acutely felt among young adults. Why highlight that finding?
Well, first, it shows that it's not just among young Canadians or those who aren't yet able to own a home, right? This, I think, one of the things that I've seen over the last decade, really, of doing public opinion research on housing is just how universal a concern it's become. It used to be something that, I'm now an old millennial. Millennials were worried about maybe a decade ago. If you lived in the lower mainland area of Vancouver, maybe around Toronto, they were isolated to those regions. This is not the case. It's universal, every part of the country. And now, as this data shows, every demographic. It's much higher among younger Canadians, but even those who may have had the privilege of owning a home are looking back and saying, look, there's something wrong with a system where we have so much land in this country. It's not like we are England or a small nation with very little real estate. We have lots of it. And yet, why has it become so hard for people to be able to achieve this goal? And I think that's why it's also become a politically powerful issue, because it's not just of those who it's affecting directly, but many parents, many grandparents look and say, look, I don't think my kids or grandkids are going to have this opportunity. And that's a problem. Yeah,
let me pick up on that point, because I'm going to ask the controller to put up that board again, because there is one more number on that board. Because when you look at it, 70% say that the housing crisis is a crisis for middle-income Canadians, not just low-income Canadians. And you say that kind of attitude could have implications for Canadian stability. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, I think we see right now, broadly speaking, that whether it's because of Donald Trump, whether it's because of AI or climate change, that people are of the belief that it is almost impossible today to get ahead. And so, no doubt, if you are a lower income Canadian and you are on the most vulnerable side, you look at housing as something that you may not have or you might lose. But for middle class Canadians, or those who aspire to be in the middle class, if you remember those days of the Trudeau government, they look at home ownership as one of those markers, right? It's one of those markers that says, look, I think it's something we should be able to achieve. If you have a good job, if you've done everything right, that's something that we should aspire to. And, we asked a question, not in this survey, 2 weeks ago, that asked Canadians, would you rather be born today or in 1950? 2/3 of Canadians say 1950. And I think part of it is because there's this nostalgia for that moment in history where it seemed possible to own a home. It seemed possible that even with one income in that household, if you were a two people with a family, that you could make it. I think people want that stability and hope again. And I think home ownership is often seen as the way to get there, and the most obvious example of success in that kind of environment.
Now, of course, housing is a shared responsibility amongst the different levels of government, but it was interesting going through your study, because clearly what you have been able to pull out is that Canadians believe that Ottawa needs to show leadership in this, because in part they think Ottawa broke it, so they should be the ones to fix it. How should that guide government policy?
Well, I think it's a reflection that, even if to your point, on a policy front, this is a shared responsibility. In fact, maybe the provinces and the municipalities actually have more responsibility. That's not where the public thinks it lies, right? And I always live in the world of perception, not reality. And when 2/3 of Canadians say, look, the onus is on the federal government. The onus is on the federal government to lead, to drive change. I think they see some of the stuff that the Carney government has done and feel good about, the plan to build as many homes. But they're also, I think, signaling something's missing, because you're talking often about non-market housing. You're talking about purpose-built rental. But when so many people want to own, I think there is a clear gap in the policy agenda and in the rhetoric and in the language and the leadership being shown by Ottawa. And that to me signals potential risk, political risk, if people at the end of the day don't feel that the government has fully lived up to its dream and its promise, frankly, to make housing more affordable for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And David, I know it's not in this study, but you're always looking at Canadian priorities. Where does this fall in terms of what Canadians believe any federal government should be addressing for them?
Yeah, we ask a question on every 2 weeks. What are the top 3 issues facing the country, or that you should think should be the top priority? And housing falls firmly in the top range, right? About 1/3 of Canadians put it in their top 3 issues. It's fallen slightly over the last number of months as Trump and the economy have kind of moved up and cost of living continues to dominate. But that cost of living measure, I think, is still in part driven by housing costs, is in part driven by people's sense of an inability to both pay the rent and the mortgage and maybe get into the housing market entirely. So it has not subsided. And if you are under the age of 40, housing is one of the most important issues. And so it's animating younger Canadians in a way that it's not for older, and I think remains a really powerful and important political issue as provincial and municipal governments are happening across the country. And hey, Michael, maybe a federal one later this year.
Yeah, maybe. And of course, we'll bug you if that happens. David Coletto, thank you for that. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.